Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us and thank you for your patience. So this is the second part of a two-part series on surgical hand ties. So before Christmas break, we covered the two-handed method. And for this session, we're going to be covering the one-handed method. So to be honest, I think that the one-handed method is a little bit harder, but we are going to get through it. And if for some reason somebody just can't figure it out by the end of our meeting tonight, I will just hold some in-person office hours, and that way we can work through it together. Okay, so just because some of you may not have been here for the first session, we're just going to talk about the basics of hand ties. So many of us are pretty familiar with the instrument tie, and that is when we use our needle drivers to form square knots. And basically what we're doing with a hand tie is we're still forming square knots. We're just doing it with our hands and without any tools. So you might be wondering why we do this. And we do it because when you just use your hands, you're able to fine tune the amount of tension that you're placing on the tissues. And there may be places in the body where you're not able to get your surgical tools down into. So when you tie with your hands, it's easier for deeper placement. The one-handed method is more commonly used, and Dr. Harding felt it was very important that we covered the one-handed method, just because that's the one that you may be asked to use during surgical clerkship. The two-handed method.
I've spoken to several individuals who are MSU COM students, and they are being asked to do the one-hand tie.
Okay.
So
yeah, this is an important one to practice before we go do our surgical rotations. And the two-handed method isn't as commonly used. It's more used in like vascular surgery or pediatric surgery, but it's still important to know. But today we're focusing on just the one-handed method. And one advantage to it is, I don't know if you guys remember, but when we did the two-handed version, we were basically making the knot right in the middle of the suture material. And then when you cut that line, there isn't a lot of line left for you to possibly place another knot. But with the one-handed method, you can use the suture material more than once. And again, a square knot is basically two overhand knots formed in opposite directions. And if you form the two overhand knots in the same direction, that's a granny knot. And that's a knot that's going to slip. It's not going to be able to hold tension. So when we correctly form the square knot, that's a knot with more integrity that's going to be able to have a lot of tension on it and not slip, which, as you can imagine, is really important when you're tying knots in somebody's body. And that's all I really have to say about that. Let's skip this slide. Just the basic structure of how this is going to work is we're going to go through it all together. And that way, different people on the e-board and Dr. Harding can chime in. And then after that, we will go into breakout rooms. And if you're having trouble at any certain point, you can work that out in the breakout room. Okay, so let me get set up here. I have like a very janky at-home Elmo set up. Just have a whole bunch of stack books with a cookie cooling rack over them.
I think it works rather well. I'm impressed.
Okay. Okay, so first off, some of you may not be using the Ethicon boards. That's fine if you're not. A shoe will work fine. If you're using a shoe, just put it on the table in front of you, and then you're going to be just working with both of the laces. And if you are just working with a binder clip, you can clip it to any old textbook like so, and then you're just going to put your string through and be working like this. But if you do have the Ethicon boards, I have one in front of me right here. Basically how this works is these rubber bands are simulating a incision, and I like to have it oriented vertically away from myself. This column type thing is for practicing placing sutures in a deeper location. So first I'm just going to show you guys what the one-handed method looks like, and then we'll start to break it down and go through how to do it together. So for the one hand tie, it doesn't really matter which hand you do the tying with. It's probably advantageous to know how to do it with both hands. But for me, I think it's a little easier to tie with my left hand. So that's what I'm going to be doing. Like I said, a square knot has two parts. It's two overhand knots tied in opposite directions. So there's going to be two major parts to completing a square knot with the one-handed method. So here's what the first part looks like. I think it's sort of like forming a claw. So that's what I call it. And then there's a transition step into the second part of the knot, which we'll talk about. So I'm cinching down that first overhand knot. And now I need to complete my second overhand knot to complete the square knot. And here's what the second motion looks like. And cinching down. And then I have one complete square knot. So let's start to go through this together. We're going to focus on the first part, the claw looking part. So if you just want to take, if you're working with the two colored string, you can just take the purple side and pass it underneath your tissue. And then you can pull through to the center of this line, but it may be easier to have a short side on the side with the hand that you'll be tying with. So I'll be tying with my left hand, so I'm going to have a shorter side on my left side. And just to start out, we're going to be holding the line in our hands like so, just kind of draped over all of our fingers. And if this is confusing to you, just put your line down flat, put your hands over it, and scoop it up into your hands. Okay. So the first part here is the trickiest part, and I know it can be frustrating, but we're going to go through it a ton of times. So, you know, don't get too frustrated here. Okay. So in your hands, in your right hand, what you're going to be doing is not very much. You're just holding on to the line, and you're going to be maintaining upward tension on the line. So up towards the ceiling, and not a lot, just a little bit, to make this piece of the line here kind of stiff, because we're going to be tying around this sort of like a post. Okay. And then with our left hand, or whichever hand that you're doing the tying with, you're going to grasp the line with your last three fingers, and then you're going to be spreading a portion of the line, sort of like a claw, with your index finger and thumb. So everyone kind of see how I did that? And this can be kind of awkward at first, so I'm going to show it again. So I'm just holding it in my hands. And then with my left hand, I'm kind of forming like a little claw here. And one thing that's going to set you up for success is having the line towards the tip of your index finger and the tip of your thumb, because if it's too far back on your fingers, like by your knuckles, it's going to be really difficult for you to maneuver this line around like you need to. So just form that claw sort of at the tip of your index finger and thumb. And now I'm going to start doing the tie. And like I said, we'll go through it plenty of times, so don't worry. So I'm maintaining upward tension with both of my hands. So there's no laxity in this line. I'm going to bring the two pieces of string towards each other. Okay. So I'm bringing this post with my right hand towards the line that I've spread apart in my left hand between my index finger and thumb. And I'm making them meet. Once I do that, I'm bringing the post towards my index finger. And I'm going to start wrapping the tip of my index finger around this post that I'm creating with my right hand. Okay, so holding, bringing together, and now I'm wrapping my index finger around that post. And while I'm doing that, I'm maintaining tension with my thumb. Your thumb is active, and I'm going to be pulling down with my thumb. Okay, so let's see that again. I have the claw, I have the post, I'm bringing the two together. I'm wrapping my index finger around that post, and while I'm doing that, I'm bringing my thumb down. And then once you get there, you're going to straighten out your index finger, and then you're going to twist out. And once you get there, you've essentially formed the first part of the square knot. So once you get to this point, now you're going to take your middle finger and support this line, squeezing with the front of your middle finger against the back of your index finger. And that's what you're going to be pulling through. And then you can cinch down. And that's the first part of the square knot. And we still need to complete the second part. And this is for sure, it's a tough move, and it's going to take some practice. It's very awkward at first. We're just going to go through this one more time, and then we do have an alternate way for how to do this first part if this just isn't working out for you. So I have my line down, hands over it, scooping it up. With my right hand, I'm just maintaining upward tension, holding onto the line with all of my fingers. With my left hand, I'm going to spread the line sort of like a claw between my index and thumb. I'm just gently holding on to the rest of the line with my last two fingers mostly, and a little bit with my middle finger. I'm going to bring these two together. Well, camera's kind of focusing there. And then once I get here, maintaining that upward tension with both hands, I'm going to wrap my index finger around the post. And while I'm doing that, I'm maintaining tension with my thumb here in my left hand. And I'm going to help guide that line down and over my nail bed of my index finger. Then I'm going to straighten my index finger and turn it outward. And once I get there, I'm going to come and support that line with my middle finger, clamping between my middle finger and the back of my index finger. And then I'm sort of just releasing everything else, and I'm going to pull through and cinch down. And if you remember from the first session we had with the hand ties, we make a big deal out of which way to pull the lines, because if you pull the wrong way, this isn't going to lay down nice and flat. So the way that I remember which way to pull the lines is if you've ever done kickboxing, I call this the claw move. In kickboxing, sometimes you do like a claw type motion where you grab the person's shirt and you like yank them towards yourself. So if you think of that, I'm taking the line and I'm pulling it towards myself. The line that I'm tying with, the hand that I'm tying with, pulling it towards myself and crossing over a little bit. So if you're doing a claw type motion, you're pulling towards yourself, and that's how I remember which way to pull the line. I hope that makes sense. And now I was kind of hoping to get some feedback if people are getting this, or if we should go through this one more time or move on to the alternate version of how to do this.
I would like to see the second part one more time where you have like the claw already like against the other side of it. I guess I just don't get how to transition to actually.
Yep. Okay, let's do it again. And if we're still not getting this version, we do have a different version, which may be easier for some people. So, okay, line's flat, scoop it up, holding the line in my hands like so, forming the claw, have a post in my right hand, bring the two together. And then the only way I can describe it is kind of how I've already been describing it. I'm sorry. So once I'm here, once I bring these together, it's really all about my left hand's index finger and thumb. So once I'm bringing this together, I'm curling the tip of my index finger around that post that my right hand is creating. And while I'm doing that, I'm moving my thumb kind of down. So I'm wrapping that line around the back of my index finger. So I'm here, bring them together, wrapping around. And then once I'm there, I'm just straightening that finger out. And then I can turn my finger out and away. And it's going to pull the line that's around the back of my nail kind of through a loop. And then you are going to support this line by squeezing with your middle finger against the back of your index finger and then just pulling that through. So let's do it one more time. Okay. The claw, the post, bring them together, wrapping my index finger around. And then once I'm here, I'm just rotating outward. Okay. You just show it one more time. Claw, post, bring them together, wrap my finger around, pulling down with my thumb, straightening my index finger, and then rotating out. Supporting this line with my middle finger and then pulling through. So if this still isn't clicking for you, it's okay. If you feel like if you feel like you've got it or you're very close to getting the hang of it, you can stick with that version of doing it. Now I'm just going to show a very slightly different version that may be helpful for you. So this time, this is the alternate version for doing the first part of the square knot. With my right hand, I'm still going to be forming a post, pulling upward, creating upward tension. But with my left hand, I'm just throwing my third finger out there as well. So I'm holding onto the line with my fourth and fifth finger with my left hand. But now I'm just sort of like creating this claw like we normally do with our index and thumb, except I'm just throwing my third finger out there as well. So this time, when I'm bringing the claw and post together, I'm still doing the same general motion. I'm going to be wrapping my index finger around, pulling down with my thumb, straightening my finger. I'm going to squeeze right away against my middle finger. So I'm squeezing between the back of my index finger where my nail bed is and my middle finger, and I can just pull that straight through and cinch down. And that seemed to help people understand a little bit easier when we tried this before. I'll show it one more time. So creating a post with your right hand, still kind of creating a claw with my index and thumb, holding the line with my fourth and fifth finger, just kind of throwing my third finger out there as well. It's not really doing anything. It's not playing an active role yet. Bringing the line together, wrapping my index finger around the post, pulling down with my thumb, straightening my index finger, immediately making contact against my middle finger, and then pulling that through and cinching down. Hoping to get some feedback again now. Whoever spoke before, are you feeling like you're getting it now?
No, but that's okay.
Okay. Addie, what do you think? Should we move on and then try and work things out in the breakout rooms?
Yeah, let's go ahead and move on with the second part, and then hopefully we'll have about a half an hour for breakout rooms. And like that first part with like wrapping around the post and then going back and flicking it out is by far the hardest part of the knot. So it's, if you're going to be confused by anything, it's going to be that part. So don't feel like stupid or anything. We had a whole hour meeting where just all of us learned how to do it. So
Yep.
you'll get there, we promise.
Do you want me to just move on to the second part or teach the transition right now? What do you think?
Yeah, I would just do the transition into the second.
Okay. Okay, so in order to make our one-handed tie very smooth and clean and efficient, we want these two motions to lead into each other. And so I'm going to show you how to end the first move, the claw part that we just learned, so that you're set up and ready to do the second motion. So you're going to do your claw. And once you have your finger rotated out and you have that knot like ready, it's formed, you just need to pull the line through. And you're going to support with your middle finger. When you do this part, I want you, whoops, sorry, I'm looking at my camera. I want you to take your thumb and use your thumb to pull the line through. And then you're going to do like this sassy little like flick where you just take your hand and you like flick up. So like if you're down here, you're flicking up. And then pull tight. So you're ending the claw movement with the line pointing upward in your hand. So we started the movement like this with the line pointing down, but I want you to end with the line pointing up like this. So I'll show that one more time. So once I get here and I'm starting to pull the line away and through, I'm going to add my thumb to help guide that out. And once I pull that through, I'm flipping over. Okay. And then you're going to cinch down. Okay. So hopefully there's at least a few people with me at this point. If you don't get the transition part, you can work on it later in your small group. So don't worry about it. But let's focus now on how to do the second part of the square knot. And this is going to be the last move to complete the square knot. So let's say you have the first part down and you're in position. And even if you don't have the first knot laid down, it's okay. Just pass your line under and hold the line like so in your hand. So in your right hand, you're holding it like normal, like how we've been doing it this whole time. And in your left hand, the line is just facing outward. like upward. So now for the second part, you're just going to kind of be holding the line between your thumb and index finger with your left hand, and then separating. I like to separate out my last 3 fingers. And then with my right hand, I'm taking this post and I'm draping it over my last 3 fingers. Taking it and draping it over my last 3 fingers and maintaining tension. And then I'm taking my middle finger, I'm going to curl around and put my middle finger behind that piece. And then I'm going to straighten it. And then I'm going to squeeze the line between the back of my middle finger and the front of my forefinger. So I'm squeezing this part of the line here. And then I'm letting everything else go and I'm pulling through. Okay, so one more time. Once you get here, draping the line over, pulling down, wrapping my middle finger around and behind that line. And then I'm squeezing between this finger and this finger and pulling through. And then I'm pulling away with my hand that's doing all the tying. And the way I remember which way to pull the line is, I think this part, the second move, looks sort of like a karate chop, and you're karate chopping people, you know, away from yourself. So I'm taking this line and I'm pulling away. Okay, so I'm gonna run through the whole thing all together, and then I think it'll be time to go out into breakout rooms. All right, so for the first part, I'm doing a claw, bringing together,